Your bones are being toned down right now. We'll talk about the construction site inside you. As you can see, I'll be covering the bone, give review of the whole video, and give a few action items. Bone is a construction site, not a finished building. This is the one most people get wrong. Most people think bone gets built once when you're young, adjusts a little with exercise, and then just sits there unchanged, unless you break it. That is wrong. Picture your bone as a construction site with two crews, working on it at the same time, a demolition crew and a build crew. Cells called osteoclasts are tearing down your bone tissue and releasing its minerals into your blood while you listen to this. This isn't damage, it's normal. It's how your skeleton reshapes itself and releases calcium when your blood needs it. Demolition is a feature, not a problem. A signal called Rankel tells the demolition crew to get to work. Your body produces Rankel constantly with no days off. A second signal, called OPG, acts like the foreman who intercepts the Rankel order before it ever reaches the demolition crew. OPG grabs onto Rankel and blocks it from getting through. Exercise rises how much OPG your body makes. No exercise means less OPG gets made, more Rankel orders get through, and the demolition crew wins. A coach reading this correctly doesn't chase more OPG through supplements or drugs first. Loading is the lever that actually moves it, and it is the one most people have direct control over starting today. Osteoporosis, a disease where bone becomes so thin and porous that it fractures from everyday stress, is what it looks like when the demolition crew has been winning for years with barely any pushback. This isn't a disease that appears overnight. It's the slow, invisible result of a construction site where nobody ever called in the build crew, until a bone that should have easily handled a small or an ordinary bump breaks instead. Here's something worth knowing about what the build crew is actually made of. Bone isn't just one material, it's two working together. One material is a hard mineral similar to chalk that resists being crushed. Think of it like concrete in a building. The other is a stretchy protein called collagen, the same protein your tendons are made of that resists being pulled apart. Think of it like rebar running through that concrete. Concrete alone shatters under bending force. Rebar alone bends without holding shape. But put them together and you get something that resists both crushing and bending. Train only the mineral side and ignore the pulling force, or the other way around, and you're building half a skeleton. The real question is, how does a bone cell even know that you exercised? The answer surprised the researchers who found it. Bone cells don't feel weight directly at all. What they can actually feel is fluid moving inside the tunnels too small to see. Running through your bone is a network of microscopic tunnels called LCM, short for lacuno-canalicular network. These tunnels connect bone cells, called osteocytes, to each other. When you load a bone dynamically, meaning you jump, run, or move against resistance, the bone bends very slightly and pushes the fluid through these tunnels. A protein called piezo1 sits on each osteocyte like a doorbell. When the fluid rushes past and pushes against the cell, piezo1 opens and lets calcium flood inside. That calcium flood is what actually calls in the build crew. It rises OPG, it recruits bone building cells called osteoblasts, and it tells Rankel to quiet down. Holding a weight without moving creates no fluid flow through these tunnels, so piezo1 never rings. The signal needs rhythm. Load, then release, load, then release. That is why walking beats standing, running beats walking, and jumping beats running. It's also why swimming and cycling, despite being great cardio, barely builds bone. Low impact means barely any fluid gets pushed through these tunnels. Here's where it actually matters if you've been doing a lot of bone healthy exercises and see nothing change. A lot of common a lot of common advice for bone health, especially for people worried about osteoporosis later in life, leans on gentle, low impact activity because it feels safer. But gentle and low impact is exactly the profile that produces least fluid shear and the weakest PSO1 signal. The research backing this up used real weight training, not gentle movement. A supervised trial in postmenopausal women used heavy deadlifts, overhead press, back squats, and jump drop landings at 85% of or more of a person's 1 rep max, and found meaningful gains in bone density and strength after 8 months. Careful. Well coached heavy loading, not caution, is what actually calls the build crew in. After roughly 15 to 20 loading cycles, meaning footsteps or jumps, the osteocytes stop responding as strongly. Run for a full hour doesn't give you an hour of bone building signals. It gives you a strong signal for the first 15 to 20 impacts, and then response fades until the cell resets, which takes about 6 to 8 hours. This is why a single marathon length run doesn't outbuild a program of shorter, more frequent sessions. The cells simply stop listening partway through, no matter how much further you go. Spreading your load out across the day instead of piling it all into one session wakes the build crew up more times. Two 20-minute walks 6 hours apart gives you two separate building signals. One 40-minute walk only gives you one because the crew is clocked out partway through. Build crew only shows up at the exact wing under construction. This is a detail that surprises people. Bone doesn't get stronger everywhere just because you loaded one part of it. Studies on a tennis player consistently find noticeably denser bone in the arm that holds the racket instead of the other arm, on the same person with the same diet, the same hormones, and same everything else. The construction crew doesn't renovate the whole building just because one wing got busy. It renovates the wing that actually felt the fluid share. This is why a training program aimed at bone needs to load the specific bones that you care about, not just general activity somewhere in the body. Your bones aren't all shaped the same way because they don't have the same job. Long bones, like the one in your thigh, are shaped like levers, built to transmit force efficiently along their length. Flat bones, like your skull and shoulder blades, are shaped like shields, built to protect what's underneath rather than to move loads. Short, chunky bones, like the ones in your wrist, are built for stability under compression from many directions at once. A small sesamoidal bones like your kneecap act like pulleys, redirecting the force of a tendon around a joint. Every one of these shapes is a construction decision, not an accident. It means that the type of loading that builds thigh bone well isn't the same loading that builds the wrist. Your skeleton reaches what's called peak bone mass somewhere around your late 20s, meaning the largest amount of bone you'll ever naturally build, mostly through growth plus whatever loading you do during those years. After that point, you're not really adding any new floors to the building. You're maintaining and slowing down the demolition crew on the floors that already exists. This is exactly why loading bone hard during your 20s and your 30s matters so much. And it is exactly why the construction site framing still helps later in life too. Because even after peak mass, the exact same demolition and build crew mechanism keeps running. It's just working from a smaller or larger starting foundation depending on what got poured earlier. After age 30, bone loss runs around 1% a year. After a big hormone shift like menopause or a major drop in testosterone, that climbs to 2 to 3% a year. Astronauts in zero gravity, where there is no mechanical loading at all, lose bone at 1 to 2% a month. The less mechanical signal there is, the faster the demolition wins. Calcium and vitamin D are bricks sitting in the warehouse, but bricks don't build anything without the work order. Work order comes from piezo 1, not from the supplement bottle. Plenty of calcium with no loading signal is a fully stocked warehouse with no construction crew ever showing up. Some medications used for severe bone loss work by slowing the demolition crew down directly, blunting how aggressively osteoclasts break bone apart. That can genuinely help in serious cases. But it's addressing only one side of the equation, the demolition side, without touching the build side at all. Piezo 1 and mechanical loading are still the only mechanism that actively calls new construction. This is why movement stays relevant even for someone already managing bone loss medically. Now let's see the review of the whole video. Your bone is actively being torn down right now by a demolition crew that never stops. The only thing that fights back is dynamic, rhythmic movement that pushes fluid through microscopic tunnels inside the bone, not standing still, not gentle low impact activity, and not calcium alone. Build crew only reinforces the exact bone that felt the load, and the foundation you pour before you're 30 sets the baseline for everything after. Now, for the last section, I'll give you some action items. Spread your loading across the day. Jump rope, brisk walking, stair climbs, or resistance training through a real range of motion all counts. This gives your bone cells time to reset every 6 to 8 hours and respond again. If you train once a day, add 2 or 3 5-minute movement breaks between sessions. Even a stair climb at lunch or a set of jump squats before shower counts as a separate signal. It doesn't need to look like a formal workout to register. Prioritize impact and real resistance over gentle movement. Walking beats standing, running beats walking, and supervised heavy resistance training with real range of motion beats them all for building density, not just maintaining it. If your current routine is entirely low impact, it's likely maintaining bone at best, not building it. Built up gradually under supervision if you're new to heavy loading or jumping. The goal is mechanical stress, not recklessness. Load in more than one direction. Remember, Your bones are shaped like different kinds of buildings for different jobs, so lean on a mix of loading types: straight line loading for long bones like squats and deadlifts, and impact or jump work that adds rhythm your bone cells actually responds to. Get calcium and vitamin D, but don't stop there. Treat them as raw materials sitting in the warehouse, not the signal that gets anything built. Pair adequate intake of both with loading that actually issues the work order. Blood test is the only reliable way to know if your vitamin D is actually adequate. Guessing from sun exposure alone is unreliable in most climates. Train the specific bone you care about. Since the build crew only reinforces the exact wing that felt load, don't assume general fitness automatically protects your bone you're most worried about, whether your hips, your spines, or your wrist. Include direct loading for those specific areas, like weighted carries or wrist loaded movements, rather than assuming overactivity covers everything equally. If bone density in your hips or spine specifically worries you, the loading needs to travel through that bone directly. A squat or a deadlift, not a leg extension machine that never asks the hip to bear weight. Don't judge results too soon. The osteocyte response happens over weeks and months of repeated signals, not a single session. What matters isn't how long a workout lasts, it's how many separate loading signals your bone cells get to direct across a consistent week after week routine. Bone density scans are typically spaced a year or more apart for this exact reason. The signal takes that long to show up as a measurable change.